The world was told a lie on the 24th of June. A lie wrapped in the language of diplomacy and broadcast on every news channel. The lie was called a ceasefire. It was presented as the end of a brutal 12-day war between Israel and Iran, a moment for the world to exhale. But for those who understood the true nature of this conflict, it was not an exhalation. It was the sharp, terrified intake of breath before the real horror begins. The velvet curtain has fallen on the first act, a savage play of fire and steel. But the audience remains frozen in their seats because they know the main performance, the one that takes place in utter darkness, is about to start. The war did not end. It merely went silent. It began on the 13th of June. An operation so audacious, so blasphemously bold, it was given a name of almost biblical arrogance: Operation Rising Lion. This was not a border skirmish. This was not a series of cautious airstrikes. This was a full-scale national vivisection. Israel did not simply attack Iran. It plunged its hand deep into the chest of the Islamic Republic and sought to rip out its heart, its brain, and its soul. The operation's scope was terrifying. It went beyond mere military targets. It was a systematic campaign of decapitation aimed at erasing the entire leadership ecosystem of Iran's military and scientific establishment. The stated goals were to eliminate Iran's dual existential threats, its nuclear program and its ballistic missile capability. But the undeclared goal was far more profound. It was to inflict a wound so deep, so traumatic, that Iran would be left a lobotomized giant, powerful in body but crippled in mind for a generation to come. The world saw the explosions. Satellite images dutifully recorded the plumes of smoke rising from air bases and oil refineries. But the true terror of Operation Rising Lion was not visible from space. It was unfolding on the ground, in the quiet streets of Tehran and the secret corridors of power. Israeli special forces, a ghost army of phantoms, had infiltrated deep inside Iranian territory. They moved with an impunity that was breathtaking, seemingly invisible to Iran's vast internal security apparatus. They were not just a reconnaissance force, they were assassins and executioners. They coordinated with the waves of jets overhead, painting targets with laser precision, ensuring that every bomb, every missile struck with surgical lethality. They announced that they had gained complete control of Tehran's airspace, a humiliating and absolute violation of a sovereign nation. And then the death list began to circulate. It was not a list of soldiers, it was a roster of Iran's most powerful men. Approximately 20 of the highest-ranking military commanders in the nation were eliminated. These were not colonels or captains, this was the head of the snake, Chief of Staff Mohammad Bagheri. The infamous commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Hossein Salami. The commander of the Air Force, Amir Ali Hajizadeh. Men who were the living embodiment of the regime's military might, erased in a matter of hours. But the purge went deeper. It struck at the nation's future. 17 key scientists from Iran's nuclear program were assassinated. These were the heirs to Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, the architect of the program killed in 2020. They were the next generation, the men who held the complex equations and theoretical models in their minds. Israel's calculation was cold and brutal. By killing these 17 minds, they could set back Iran's quest for a nuclear weapon not by months, but by years, perhaps even a decade. This was not warfare. This was a targeted intellectual holocaust. The material destruction was just as systematic. Over 80 of Iran's military aircraft, aging but still functional relics from before the 1979 revolution, were turned into smoldering scrap metal on the tarmacs of 6 different air bases. The missile bases at Khanzar, Sirap, Pirasap, names previously known only to intelligence analysts, were now craters on a map, their ground infrastructure razed to the ground. These were the crucibles where Iran forged its long-range vengeance. Now they were gone. The economic jugular was also targeted. Oil depots north of Tehran erupted in flames, and the headquarters of Iran's state television, the regime's main propaganda mouthpiece, was hit. The message was clear: nothing is safe. We can reach you anywhere. We can kill anyone. We own your sky. We walk your streets, and we can turn your nation off like a switch. Iran's response, when it came more than half a day later, was ferocious. It was the roar of a wounded, enraged beast. Operation True Promise 3 was a barrage of missiles and drones that streaked across the sky, a desperate attempt to prove that Iran was not a helpless victim, that it too could draw blood. And it did. Iran claimed it was their resilience, the righteous fury of their missile campaign, that forced the enemy to the table and compelled them to accept a ceasefire. They did not just aim for military bases. They aimed for the symbols of Israeli power and intellect. They struck the Weizmann Institute of Science, one of the world's leading research centers, claiming the destruction of vital laboratories. This was a symbolic counter-assassination, an attempt to kill knowledge in return for the killing of their scientists. They unleashed ballistic missiles on the headquarters of Amman, Israel's formidable military intelligence bureau. They struck the Kiryat base and a Mossad intelligence facility in Tel Aviv, the very nerve center that coordinates Israel's overseas assassinations. The Iranians claimed that these most fortified buildings in Israel were ripped open by large explosions. They targeted the Gazan Gep high-tech zone in Beersheba, the heart of Israel's much-vaunted cybersecurity and defense industry. They hit an electricity facility in Ashdod, plunging thousands in central Israel into darkness. They struck Israel's largest oil refinery in Haifa, forcing its shutdown. To prove their point, they flooded the world with images of destroyed buildings in Tel Aviv, Haifa, and other Israeli cities. They were shouting to the world, "We can bleed too. We are not intimidated. We will strike you in your homes, in your most secret sanctums." But when the smoke cleared and the accounting was done, the numbers told a story of a horrifyingly one-sided slaughter. Iran reported that approximately 500 of its people were killed and over 3,000 were injured. Israel reported 28 deaths and a few hundred injuries. 500 to 28. It was the cold, brutal arithmetic of a technological and intelligence mismatch. It was the butcher's bill for a nation that had been caught utterly, catastrophically unprepared. Iran's nuclear facilities at Natanz, Isfahan, and Fordow were confirmed to be damaged. The American Defense Secretary declared with confidence that Iran's nuclear ambitions had been eliminated. President Trump echoed this, noting severe damage to a deep underground facility. The truth, as always, was murkier. Politico reported that Iran had managed to evacuate some equipment and personnel, and that it still possessed a large reserve of centrifuges. The IEA, locked out of full monitoring since 2018, could not be sure. The risk had been wounded but not extinguished. And so, the ceasefire was declared. A lie to calm the markets. A lie to placate the international community. A lie to allow both sides to claim victory while they prepared for the next far more terrifying act. The world thinks it is over, but it is holding its breath for the wrong thing. It is watching the skies for the next missile. It should be looking under a microscope. It should be looking at the genetic code. The true secret mission of Operation Rising Lion was not the destruction of bases or the assassination of commanders. That was merely the cover, the loud, violent distraction for an operation of such diabolical genius that it belongs in the realm of science fiction. The Israeli commandos, the ghost army that walked unseen through Iran, had a primary objective that was never briefed to any government outside of a tiny sealed circle within Mossad and the IDF. They were not just there to paint targets, they were a biological harvesting unit. While the world focused on the explosions, these phantom soldiers were collecting genetic material from the kill sites. Skin fragments, blood residue, hair follicles, from the 20 dead commanders, from the 17 murdered scientists. They were not just confirming kills, they were building a library, a genetic library of Iran's ruling elite, a detailed map of the DNA, the unique biological signatures of the men who lead the nation's military and its most secret scientific programs. Why? The answer is the most terrifying weapon ever conceived, a weapon that makes a nuclear bomb look crude and indiscriminate. Israel is now in possession of the genetic blueprint of its enemy's leadership. In their most advanced biological laboratories, they are now working to create a new kind of weapon, a targeted retrovirus, an airborne pathogen engineered to be harmless to the general population, but lethal to individuals carrying specific, unique genetic markers. A disease that could be released into the air in Tehran, that would be inhaled by millions, but would only activate and kill those who are related by blood to the men who were just assassinated. A weapon that could wipe out not just the current leadership, but their sons, their brothers, their nephews, the entire next generation of the ruling class. A genetic purge, a silent, invisible plague that would look like a series of unfortunate heart attacks, cancers, and sudden illnesses, but would in fact be a meticulously executed second wave of assassinations. This is why the Israeli Chief of Staff declared that the operation is not yet over. The weapon is still being calibrated, the virus is still being perfected. This is the new face of war. It has gone from the macroscopic to the microscopic. Iran's retaliation, its missile strikes on Israeli intelligence headquarters, now takes on a new, more desperate meaning. Were they just lashing out in revenge, or did they have a sliver of intelligence, a horrifying rumor of what the commandos were truly doing? Were they trying to destroy the Mossad labs where this genetic data might be analyzed? Were they trying to kill the Israeli bioscientists who were about to turn their very DNA into a weapon against them? We may never know. What we do know is that the world is in a new and terrible place. The conflict has not de-escalated, it has metastasized. It has moved from a war of explosives to a war of genetics, of biology, of information. The damage to Iran's nuclear ecosystem is real, but perhaps irrelevant. Israel does not need to fear an Iranian bomb if it can ensure there is no one left alive with the knowledge to build it. Iran has shown it is not easily intimidated, that it will strike back, but it is fighting a conventional war against an enemy that has already moved into the fifth dimension of conflict. The world is watching the border, waiting for the first shot of the next act. They are fools. The first shot of the next act was a swab of DNA collected from a corpse in Tehran. The next battlefield is not the sky over the Persian Gulf, it's the human bloodstream. The next war will not be televised, it will be diagnosed.